Good afternoon. Welcome to the White House. My name is Jay Hine. I direct the White House Office of Faith-Based and Community Initiatives. So on behalf of President Bush and Mrs. Bush, I welcome you. It's a special place to meet. For some of you, perhaps it's the first time to the White House. Other of you have been here often, and you're valued partners of ours, and it's good to see you again. But it's always special, even for us that work here every day, to walk in these doors and to be able to contemplate that we're carrying on the nation's business. And the work that gets done, we hope is a value added from the work we do in these offices. But the work of getting the people's business done, we realize, is in communities. So you all come here as community servants. You serve in our nation's best interests. That is the heart of the president, and that's why he formed this initiative. So today we've assembled a room of leaders to contemplate how we can prevent bad things from happening to those communities, how we can heal and seek restoration on the other end of man-made or natural disasters. And we'll talk about the strategies that we're forming collectively between the sectors to make that good work happen. But it only happens effectively when you all are engaged locally. And so you represent very key constituencies. We admire you, and we're delighted to be in your company today. So again, welcome to the White House. We're honored to be in your company. And hopefully today will be a value add to the work that you do tomorrow and on a day-to-day basis. So we are, I think you're all leaders, as I just said, from various sectors and national nonprofit leadership. We have FEMA officials here. We may have the mayor of Nashville, Tennessee. Are you here? I saw your name on the list, and other city officials. So I wanted to welcome you. We do also have my 8th grade son's Little League baseball coach. Where's the officer for civil rights? I just lost him. There he is in the back here. Secretary Chertoff's officer for civil rights, who is, that's right, give me the baseball signals. By way of full disclosure, I coach the first base, he coaches the third base, and he leads Muslim outreach and other important work for Secretary of Homeland Security and his role in leading the Civil Rights Division. So, so we have just a terrific set of folks here today. So a couple of initial thoughts before we move into the work. Of course, what we know from Katrina in particular is that not only was it one of the worst disasters that happened upon one of America's communities, it represented the fact that Americans are a generous people. We knew that, of course, but we reached unprecedented levels of generosity post-Katrina. We had over 1 million volunteers in the region who provided over 14 million hours of service. It was the largest recorded volunteer response to a natural disaster in our nation's history. The American business community contributed $1 billion, the first time, also in recorded history, that collectively our corporate sector provided an amount over $1 billion to a single disaster, which is a remarkable response, of course. And we organized a bit of that work here, the Corporation for National and Community Service, led efforts, spent money on building volunteer infrastructure, of course, and you may have heard that now in the sort of contemplative period following the immediate Katrina response, the corporation has decided to make a more systemic effort to mobilize and strengthen volunteers, and so they've made disaster response one of its 5 national strategies, and so the state commissions, you'll hear about this later on in today's event, all organize strategies to better mobilize you. USA Freedom Corps, another one of our sort of sister agencies here at the White House, posted volunteer opportunities on a website and enabled nonprofits to post their needs on a website, which led to a remarkable uptick of response and also better organization of response. But as I said in my introductory remarks, the bottom line is that federal leadership can and should occur, but local action is where it's at. So the President of the United States says this, quote, "Local mayors, council members, and county commissioners know best what risks their communities face. They also know how best to use the talents and the time of their citizens to prevent, to prepare, and to respond to those risks." So what we did in the faith-based and community initiatives at the White House was to form a center for this initiative at Homeland Security. To build on an inherent strength, which is that nonprofit organizations and volunteers, of course, are the first in and the last out, and oftentimes the highest performing of those actors that can respond in partnership, hopefully better partnership with government. But we, didn't have a Department of Homeland Security many years ago. That's a new creation, and within it, one of the core tenets, and the Secretary will speak to this too, is that we knew we need to get more mature and more invested in becoming a part of the mobilization effort. John Cook, could you give a little wave here, is director of that center. We're delighted to have him and Greg and the whole team serving every day. The Faith-Based and Community Initiative is organized in a very unique fashion. Perhaps you know this already, but not only do we have my office, which serves the president and carries out his agenda, how to build partnerships for government through the private sector, nonprofit organizations, but we've embedded this initiative in a dozen federal agencies, because what we know is that governing is a slow process of a lot of individual decisions. So we're not just banging a drum saying, oh, you need to engage more partners. We need to go through the careful process of saying, what does that look like for workforce development? What does that look like for affordable housing? What does that look like for international relief and development? And in a retail fashion, day by day, our centers are located at the agencies to do that hard work. The headline that our initiative gets is about equal treatment, or how we protect faith-based organizations' character. Well, that's a part of our work, but it's only a part of our work. The bigger part of our work is that we're trying to strengthen governing, and you can only do that with an intimate knowledge of how the agencies operate and an effective relationship with the program bureaus all across that agency. And so it varies by the 12 agencies where this initiative is located. So at one level, the center represents the White House in that agency, so it does represent a president's vision, which has some currency inside government. That's helpful. We get to move things faster that way. But it's the portfolio that it carries is that of the agencies. So they're both speaking to us at the White House, but also within the agency to say, how do we prevent, how do we respond, and how do we recover better if we have faith-based and community groups more mobilized. So we're not inventing this work. The FOADs, Citizens Corps, and Innovations, and other entities are already out there doing this work. We're a partner to you. We want to be a better partner to you on an ongoing basis. But we can use the federal government's platform to strengthen those organizations that are similarly purposed, and to be a portal for the faith-based community groups that want to get in this work or want to do it better. So what I want to give to you as sort of an image is that we get it. We know what it takes, and we know it's hard work, and we know it's a long journey. So when I said that you do the real work, and we're trying to create a better environment for you and more resource for you, this is what it looks like in Homeland Security space. The federal government and our national partners, our larger partners, which are very useful and very effective, operate at a distance. They're larger, they have more capacity, that's a good thing, but they're also distant, and they're impersonal, and that's just by definition. And so that's a bad thing when we're trying to work on transformation and local effectiveness. So how do we move from the large and the distant and the impersonal to the smaller and the local and the more personal? Well, that's what we worry about in this initiative. That's what we work on, to be able to say partnerships generally isn't what we're talking about. Partnerships particularly, how we take these big systems and help them grow smaller and more locally, and therefore we think more sustainably. So that's kind of the picture. And today's event is located in a series that we have here every month at the White House. And we take a different compassion issue, and we say there are just some things that are unacceptable, whether it's the dropout crisis at home, where 50% of communities of color are dropping out of high school before completion, or the millions who are dying from AIDS in Africa, and other sort of social issues, to say we need to care about this, we need to organize our action to be more effectively in response together, government plus the nonprofit sector. And then we highlight the best practices from communities, and you'll see that today. We're going to get me out of the way here real soon, and we'll have the secretary. That's a real honor, and so there'll be a couple of government officials speaking to you, but more voices that you'll hear are actually community leaders, because again, you are the initiative, and because you take initiative at home. And so we get to highlight best practices and best thought leadership that's being offered from the community level. And then we get to contemplate together. The reason you're 120 strong in this room representing different sectors isn't because we're just going to kind of talk at you and offer a bit of education here, but we're trying to collaborate more effectively with you and mobilize you as leaders, because we don't want this to be an event only. We want to be a process where we're better engaged together. So again, we have these compassion action roundtables every month at the White House, and we're just honored today that we're taking on this critical issue of prevention, response, and recovery through enhanced partnerships. And to begin the work, Erin Streeter, if you could join me up here, Director of READY at Department of Homeland Security, will take the podium now. She will moderate this first panel, which is focused on the prevention dimension. She's joined by a very impressive panel who could just maybe take their seats at the table here and give face and offer thought leadership to the important work of trying to make sure that problems don't happen in the first place. So, ladies and gentlemen, please join me up here, and ladies and gentlemen in the audience, if you could join me in welcoming this first panel.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's really a pleasure to be with you all today and talk to you a little bit about the READY campaign, but also to hear from you about what you're doing on the local level, because that's where the real change is happening. So again, I'm honored to be here. For those of you who aren't familiar with the READY campaign, I just want to take a few minutes and talk a little bit about the campaign. It's the Department of Homeland Security's National Public Awareness Campaign that's designed to educate and empower Americans to prepare for and respond to emergencies. We partner with the Advertising Council and really rely heavily on media to get our word out and our messages. Specifically, we're asking Americans to do three very specific things: get an emergency supply kit, to make a family emergency plan, and to be informed about the different emergencies that can happen and the appropriate responses. I'm proud to say that DHS, as well as the READY campaign, are marking our 5th anniversary this year. So this makes this year even more, all the more special, because we're marking a very important point, a critical point in terms of getting Americans to take steps to prepare. We're seeing still a lot of complacency out there among Americans, believing that it's just not going to happen to them, or if it does happen, there will be someone there to take care of them. And unfortunately, that is just not the case. Americans and all of us need to remember that we're going to be the first line of defense to any type of emergency. And typically it may be that first responders cannot get to you until the first 72 hours or till your area's been deemed safe. So therefore, it is really important that Americans are taking steps to prepare and educating themselves. And certainly, we've had a very active weather season. We've seen a lot of severe weather out there. We've seen overseas a lot of devastating, catastrophic disasters, again, bringing to life the need for Americans to take those steps. You all play a very, very important part. You all have the reach and the capacity to talk to people, to educate people, and for them to really see what you're saying and empower them. So again, it's really great to be here today, because you all do have such an advantage because you are on the ground, you are in so many communities, and your reach is so far and wide. Today, I think we have a really important panel, some of which I am familiar with and work with at the READY campaign, and others I think will be new to me, so I'm anxious to hear from them. But before we introduce the panel, I want to check and see how many of you have participated in National Preparedness Month. Great. That is something that the department sponsors, actually specifically the READY campaign, and that's one way I think after today that I hope you all will consider joining a part of. It's a great way for you all to get involved and promote emergency preparedness on the local level. We have a lot of resources and tools that will help you all do that, and I think many of the folks that you'll hear from today have great ways and examples of how they're doing that today. So with that, I'll introduce our first panelist, Jennifer Poston. Poston is from the Interfaith Ministries of Greater Houston. She's the manager of READY Houston, a program that is very involved in the community and is actually working with her community to launch a regional preparedness month or initiative here shortly. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Jennifer. I think you can use the mic there.
Okay. Well, good afternoon. Interfaith Ministries, where I am, is Houston's oldest interfaith in Houston. Our mission states that I Am brings together people of diverse faiths for dialogue, collaboration, and service. And our programs reflect that. Under dialogue, we have our Amazing Faith projects that promotes tolerance, understanding, and respect. And collaboration is expressed through our Ready Houston program that works with Houston's faith-based communities to develop and implement a unified response to local disasters. All of our faith traditions call upon us to serve others, and at IM, we are the largest provider of Meals on Wheels in the state of Texas. We serve over 4,000 seniors a day. And IM also provides refugees from over 25 countries a fresh start in the Houston area through our Refugee Service Program. But as manager of Ready Houston, my department shares IM's mission of dialogue, collaboration, and service. Under Dialogue, Ready Houston provides annual symposiums and conferences for the Houston faith community from everything from disaster preparedness to pandemic influenza. Collaboration manifests itself through HYDRA, Houston's Interfaith Disaster Response Alliance that IM convenes. HYDRA brings together a broad cross-section of Houston's diverse faith community in the mission to develop and implement a unified response to local disasters. IM provides HYDRA's houses of worship, seminars on business contingency planning and risk analysis. IM is also currently collecting asset inventories of HYDRA's houses of worship. This resource typing provides our community with an inventory of personnel, supplies, and equipment throughout the city. Ready Houston also holds a seat at the Harris County JIC and the Regional MAC during incidents of national significance. Ready Houston is also committed to service. Through our Volunteer Leadership Corps, our mission is to recruit, train, and mobilize volunteers to respond to the call in the aftermath of a disaster. Our awareness trainings consist of household preparedness, spiritual and emotional care training, which is based on the NOVAD's Light Our Way, volunteer management training, which is based on the Points of Light's effective use and management of unaffiliated volunteers, also strategic national stockpile and points of distribution training, and ICS 100 and 700. Additionally, Ready Houston supports many of its partners by responding to disasters, by assisting in the staffing and operations of local volunteer reception centers, and housing the city's donation call center at IM. In conclusion, Ready Houston doesn't provide any direct services in the aftermath of a disaster. We feel our role is that of conduit, convener, and coordinator and honest broker between FBOs, NGOs, and GOs. Thank you again for this invitation today, and God bless.
Thank you, Jennifer. I should let you all know that I'm moving kind of quickly because I want to be able to have some of a discussion at the end if we can. So we'll do that. One thing that Jennifer, I failed to mention, as a part, she's been very active in her own community. I think aside from what she's doing, she recruited over 60,000 faith-based volunteers for Operation Compassion in the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina, and I think that is just so astounding. So thank you very much. The next panelist is Carrie Kingsland, who is the U.S. Director of Convoy of Hope. Carrie is a nationally recognized leader in the field of disaster response. He and his team have effectively trained and mobilized thousands of volunteers to meet human needs across the United States. So with that, Carrie, I'll let you go ahead and describe some of your efforts.
Thank you. We have been a service provider for some time, since 1994. Convoy of Hope has been in over 650 communities in the United States, doing outreaches and compassion-related work, as well as disaster response. And that accounts for some 350,000 volunteers that have been involved in what we do. A lot of what I'm going to talk about today is about Hope Begins Here. It's an acrostic for helping others prepare for emergencies. Really was born out of some of our field work and experiences. Though the faith-based community did a tremendous job, as we've seen through Katrina. Convoy of Hope saw it 9/11, we saw it at the Florida hurricanes in 2004, and we're constantly reminded of it during Katrina. For as many churches that were engaged, we found many churches that were not engaged. The doors were closed, the lights were turned off, and we found out that it wasn't because they didn't care, it was because they did not know what to do. They didn't know how to respond. It was outside of the framework of what is normal for them. And so being a grassroots organization and working in the field, we felt that there's a need to bring together existing services and introduce them to the faith-based community. One of the assumptions we identified early on is that most churches are unaware that there is an emergency manager in their town, nor have they met that individual. They're not aware of the framework of what both camps are doing. Another assumption we made was the languages that are being spoken. Two different groups. You know, if I told you, if I went to the EM and said, listen, the general superintendent has been endorsed by the EPs to come speak to the general council on the subject of eschatology, the EM scratching his head. On the flip side of that, when we tell the pastor, Pastor Smith, because of our MOU with SEMA, and we're able to evac our guy Steve from this office into the EOC, he's likewise scratching his head. So there's some basic barriers there that have kept collaboration, cooperation from happening amongst the faith-based community. Hope Begins Here is a campaign that happens in a city, in a county, in multiple counties, where we bring together the faith-based community and all the existing emergency services of all kinds and allow the faith-based community to have a critical view, one glance of everything that is there for them. And the campaign is in 3 prongs. A typical life cycle might be this. In the first month, it happens anywhere between 1 and 3 months. The first month, there is a faith-based symposium where the church leaders are brought together and we talk about resiliency and recovery. We talk about simple things that they can do that can have a tremendous impact in times of disaster. We all know some of the problems and the challenges of unaffiliated and unassigned volunteers and services. This helps them be introduced to things that do matter to them and help them understand where they fit, knowing that we know they fit. We know that there's a place for them in disaster. Help them begin taking steps to prepare their congregations, prepare themselves, and to find their role in disaster. The second prong of that event, of the campaign, is a business seminar where we target business leaders. We came to this conclusion. Every church has business leaders, business owners, management people, and their families too. So to take a holistic approach to this, we felt like we needed to put our arms around the entire faith-based community and recognize the value they have as potential shelters, case management people, leaders. How can we help the leadership in communities, the business leaders, recover faster and address the pertinent issues that they have to get back online and working? And then therefore, we need to address families. So the first prong, a faith-based symposium. Second prong is a business seminar. And the third event is a family festival that we do, where we invite families to come with vendors, with exhibitors, with all the personnel, the response personnel in a community or county, to see with their own eyes, educational tools that are there for them. There's training, there are breakout sessions for all 3 of these prongs of this campaign. Lots of opportunity for people to connect together and greatly understand their opportunity to be prepared. Just recently I was with a group and we were talking about a pandemic. And it was amazing that the impact it had upon the clergy in the room when they recognized that if there were a pandemic, how their congregations would be impacted and what they would not be allowed to do, or some of the things that they would have to address that they haven't even begun thinking about. So at the basic level, this initiative, we decided to do this campaign in our own hometown. Let's pilot it where we know the people, where we know the relationships, because this is about partnerships. This is about taking many friends here in the room with us, partners in the room with Convoy here today, working together to do what we can never do by ourselves, and promoting that. And so we've worked really hard to bring that together. One of the things that we've added to the campaign are follow-on actions. They're interlaced in the life cycle of the campaign. We can't accomplish everything in the event itself, but there are wonderful existing trainings. I'll pick on CERT, for instance. CERT's available in every county and state of our nation. To expose churches and business leaders, how they can be involved with being prepared and putting together a team. Some of our other partners are some resiliency and recovery organizations. The Reform Institute. We're working through some of the language with the Salvation Army right now as they're wanting to partner with us in part of this. And we have several other partners in the room. It's a collaborative work of bringing it all together and sharing that piece in a campaign that touches a lot of people. One of the things that we're excited about has been the response back. We had a local emergency manager said, you've allowed me to do in 3.5 hours what it would have taken me 3 years to accomplish on my own. A mass care provider said, we've lit a fire under the churches. I can't handle all the calls that I'm getting right now in response to this. So it's a platform that allows many caregivers to come together and share their expertise, their insight, their resources, and provide training.
Great, thank you, Carrie. A couple of things that Carrie mentioned that I really would encourage you all, if you're not already doing this, and that is you all really do have the ability to bring together your community in a way that inspires discussion and dialogue. And what you all do best is to find a need in the community that is needed and to fill that need. And I think to your point of the emergency manager's comment that, what you accomplished in 3.5, weeks and 3 years, I mean, that's really, I think, really the truth. So one of the things that we're trying to do at the department is really to encourage people to come together, find out what the community's emergency response plan is and how you can play a role in that and how you can work to educate the community about what that emergency response plan is, and also play as a role of connector. Oftentimes we hear that, schools are left out of the table, and obviously they have some of our precious folks there during the day, children and your children. And so if something happens, knowing what the school's policy is, what their plan is, and making sure that that's integrated into the community, you all can play a role in making sure that that conversation's happening and helping to fill any sort of need that may arise in the community where they're not able to fulfill that. So I think that's really great that you're doing that, Carrie, and thank you so much for those comments. Our next panelist, Mary Marr, is the founder and chairman of the Christian Emergency Network. She was called into ministry in 1978 after a successful career in public education, both as a teacher and a career education administrator. Mary also, believe it or not, serves as a radio broadcaster in which she uses her voice to rally and inspire the greater church nationwide in a biblical readiness and response to disasters of all kinds. She's been interviewed on National Public Radio and also is an author and conference speaker, and she's the author of Lightening the Way. With that, I'll turn it over to Mary.
Very much, Erin. I have a question for each one of you. While the UN, the U.S., and World Vision first responders were struggling getting visas 5 days into the recent Burma disaster, a national Burmese Christian underground church ministry with skilled professionals was receiving aid airdrops with supplies as the first responders. How many of you heard that news? Case in point. We believe at Christian Emergency Network that local readiness is the most cost-effective, relationally impactful, often the quickest, and in this case, the only first true responder to reach those hurting lives. And since we share that common belief, and 7 years ago when we founded Christian Emergency Network, we believe that there were two key principles where we saw a huge need within the whole disaster response arena. That is in greater communications, which is often the weakest link that we have in disaster response, as well as in the collaborative effort, especially within the faith-based community. And so what CEN does is it comes alongside of those organizations and those churches that are already responding or want to respond and helps to support them. When we started 7 years ago, it was started with just simply 10 national leaders who would be very familiar with you by name. And we decided that we needed to be more cross-denominational and cross-organizational in our collaborative responses. Since that time, Christian media, all forms of Christian media, TV, web, print, all of them, radio, all of them gather together now, and every single day we have this collaborative Christian media group responding in a way that they didn't do 7 years ago. That was a tremendous outcome from the collaborative formation of media. Also with Christian relief organizations that many of them did not have any public affairs offices, did not know even how to communicate the message, where they needed to get their volunteers into a particular arena or call up volunteers. And so these smaller groups really needed to have a voice for the wonderful heroic work that they were doing. So CEN has really used its communication abilities to draw alongside the National Preparedness Committee to make our group of Christians more aware of their personal responsibilities, ready to care for their own need as well as the needs of others within their local area, and to be there when, how, and where they need to be when disasters occur of all different kinds. CEN recognizes that no single organization can prepare churches across America. Each of us have maybe a slice of the loaf in terms of preparation, but no one single organization can do that. However, when communication undergirds the collaborative effort, we are able to reach across a lot of the boundaries that normally would separate us. And so CEN's strength is networking. And we see our goal is to connect where connections haven't been made before, and to accelerate and to actually undergird the resources where they're most needed, and to absolutely undergird those that have resources that are even unknown to others. During a disaster, CEN has a collaborative infrastructure in place to reach 85% of American households within 60 minutes of a major incident. During Katrina, the website alone received 20 million hits a day. One radio interview reached 6 million listeners regarding volunteerism and the importance of keeping the light on when the lights were going off with secular media. It's a very key thing for the faith-based community. And CEN alerts reached Katrina victims to evacuate when all other sources failed. Somehow those powered-up laptops kept on working, and people knew then that they had to get out when before they didn't know. What does this look like? CEN is an information distribution network made up of several thousand different organizations, 80-plus denominations, 45,000 local churches nationwide, and one partner alone extends those churches to 300,000 nationwide. Our website has free preparedness and response news, training, and materials. Our response network includes 250 reporters who report across the nation from their local area to 1,600 print outlets, 20,000 email subscribers, 1,200 Christian radio outlets, and 2 national satellite feeds that reach into mega churches throughout the United States. It's a tremendous communications network. And what we do is we make sure that we have public service announcements going on every day that are non-activation, practical readiness tips. And then during activation, we provide pre-recorded public service announcements so that the media outlets can immediately download those, and they are given prompts that the resources are there. Already there, done for them, the timely, accurate information. In addition to that, CEN has collaborated with the Department of Homeland Security, with the Center for Disease Control, with the White House Press Office, and we have done this with 6 staff, and as well as volunteers from related backgrounds. The monthly cost to maintain the system has been $20,000 a month. Quite remarkable. How did we do it? The first thing, we based our principles on collaboration. And true collaboration is really rare even amongst the well-intentioned. And so true collaboration was a principle that we followed based on the models of the Mission America Coalition and the International Lausanne Convention. We didn't try to reinvent the wheel. We came alongside those experts that already knew what they were doing and helped to hold their arms up. CEN's communications infrastructure, as well as no dollar chasing, by the way, with a lean, effective, and efficient budget, has open source technology. And in that regard, we're able to have an interactive web application that is stable, that's cost effective, that has an ease in setup, is easy to maintain, and has upgrade capability as well as further integration. The international components of the CEN structure is easily adaptable. That new technology also allows us to do those instantaneous public service announcements and radio interviews, some TV interviews as well, through the audio-video streaming that some of our partners provide in the collaborative effort, as well as online instruction where it's applicable. I'm pleased to say that this year we are launching the Ready Church Initiative, which we will start a church pilot in one city in the United States. And that city has not yet been selected. We will work out all of the proof of concept of having a vision cast, providing training, as well as all the collaborative media network. and then we will replicate that nationwide. On a personal note, in September 2001, our president cast a heart vision for this nation to unite, to care for our neighbors, and to share hope. I can tell you this moved my heart. My father helped to establish the Civil Defense Ham Radio Alert System in World War II, which saved many lives. He modeled a calm, resolute passion for assisting in crisis. And I'm here to tell you that as I sit here, I almost died 3 times before the age of 9. And every single year of my life has not been without a great physical challenge. And yet hope eluded me until someone shared eternal hope with me. Heart, help, and hope. This is our commission.
Mary, thank you. A couple things I'd just like to say about the work that you're doing. It's tremendous how you've been able to reach out to so many people through that network. And I think one thing that I would like you all to think about is as you do work to educate Americans about what they need to do to prepare, one of the things that we do here often is there's a lot of preparedness messaging out there. And so the ability for us to be consistent in our messaging and telling the public the same thing is going to play a very vital role, because otherwise they get turned off because they hear, well, what am I supposed to do? Is it have an emergency supply kit? Prepare for what? They have lots of questions that come up, so it's great that you're doing that work, and we really do appreciate it. Before we move to our next speaker, I just am curious to know how many people in here have a plan in place if something should happen with your family? Pretty good. Normally, it's very few, so hopefully all of you after today will go home and make sure you have your plan in place.
Definitely like first responders.
That's true.
Okay, with that, I'd like to introduce our final panelist, Paul Goldenberg, the National Director of the Secure Community Network. Paul has built a distinguished career as a highly decorated criminal justice executive with extensive and broad-based experience in a wide variety of high-profile and politically sensitive government and corporate environments. His record of resolving numerous high-profile and confidential matters for governments, businesses, and other organizations around the world, and establishing the first statewide law enforcement office in the United States for hate crime prevention and intervention on behalf of the New Jersey State Attorney General's office in the early 1990s. He has also served and was selected by the United States Helsinki Commission to act as a special advisor to the Office for the Democratic Institutions and Human Rights within the Office for Security and Cooperation in Europe, and as a result has consulted a number of countries in internal security, human rights, and law enforcement services. Finally, following the 1993 World Trade Center bombings, Mr. Goldenberg was chosen by New Jersey's governor to develop and oversee New Jersey's specialized counterterrorism and SWAT training for all 21 county SWAT teams. So clearly he's going to bring a completely different perspective to this discussion, so it's really great to have you here.
Thank you very much. And it's really a privilege for me to be here today. It's the last 3.5 years that I've had the opportunity to work with SCAN and our different faith-based groups in the office of within Homeland Security, the various offices within Homeland Security. But I tell you, after an almost 25-year career, I'd say one of the most concerning things I ever heard in my career were the following words. I just took the position to head up SCAN, which is really an enigma within the Jewish communities, and I'll explain a little bit more about that in a moment. But what happened is just weeks after that Katrina took place, and it was just the first 24 hours where we called our Jewish communities in New Orleans, our leadership, and the first question was, "How are you doing?" which almost sounds naive. How are you doing? The second question is, how are you reacting, and where are your plans? And the response literally was, I think our plans are floating down the Mississippi River right now. So the reason I open that up with that clear statement is and you just said it, having a plan, testing the plan, and I'll start out by saying it. I was going to end my comments, but having a plan, testing a plan, and making sure that plan works is going to literally be the difference between life and death for all of our communities. And that's why working with Homeland Security and READY organization has been really terrific. Representing the Secure Community Network, a nonprofit organization founded by the 56 major organizations constituting the Conference of Presidents of major Jewish organizations. I'm honored to be here today before America's faith-based and community organizations leadership, all who have been tremendously responsible for providing a vast array of precious human and social services, vitally needed by all Americans. All Americans. Responding to the President and the Secretary of Homeland Security's call for American citizens of all faiths to rise to the challenge of securing our homeland, the leadership of the American Jewish community established the Secure Community Network in 2004, an integrated, coordinated approach for addressing security and preparedness in communities and directly engaging citizenry across the nation. With guidance from and collaboration with many divisions within the Department of Homeland Security, Citizen Corps, the newly established Protected Services Division, the Office of Bombing Prevention, and other federal and state agencies, the Secure Community Network has made great strides in influencing change within our community over the past 3.5 years. And we do thank all of the distinguished professionals we have worked with at these agencies for their dedication not only to our country, but our ongoing support as well. The organized Jewish community established a coordinated approach for community-wide notifications, crisis management, and security measures, emphasizing common standards for enabling Jewish communities throughout North America to embrace and evidence a culture of security awareness, preparedness, disaster recovery, and most important, resiliency. To support this effort, we have really maximized the use of technologies. We use a technology known as NC4, which is the National Center for Crisis and Continuity Coordination, which is a web-based platform that tracks in real time a wide range of natural disasters, incidents, and events impacting communities across this country. And for performing many of our essential tasks, this has been a necessity. An excellent example of how the Secure Community Network monitors and responds to multiple challenges is best illustrated by the following factual circumstances. In late August 2005, when Hurricane Katrina captured the attention of the world, SCAN was collaborating with one of our founding institutions, the United Jewish Communities, who organized relief efforts for the thousands of victims impacted by the disaster. Working cooperatively with the United Jewish Communities, and during the response and recovery phases, the following actions are an excellent example of how faith-based efforts can influence positive outcomes in the face of disaster. Working with key representatives from DHS for identifying and mobilizing clergy who could be on the scene immediately for ensuring that victims would be properly cared for in accordance with ritualistic beliefs, and also, most important, providing spiritual support for others. We also worked very closely with United Jewish Communities in having them access staging areas and for appropriate government officials, for senior leadership to assess damage, recover critical assets, and establish backup operations. We consulted with and advised organizational partners who provided relief funding and boots on the ground representation for assisting with the massive relocations and resource constraints. Interestingly enough, though, at about the same time the eyes of the world were fixated on Katrina, on the exact same day that CNN was playing Katrina out, there was a small scroll at the bottom of the screen. Another news story was unfolding in Los Angeles, California, concerning the arrests of homegrown terrorists who were plotting to attack Jewish worshipers at 2 synagogues in Los Angeles, California, that may have potentially or could have resulted in massive casualties. Recognizing that this plot was described as only weeks away from becoming operational, and again, this is the same day as Katrina, it was clear that the message concerning a potential incident of this magnitude has a rippling effect throughout the community that extends far beyond the 2 institutions that were deemed potential targets. SCAN engaged with local authorities and our local federation in Los Angeles on this matter as well to ensure that accurate information regarding the plot and subsequent arrests were being shared with all, knowing full well that misinformation and/or no information often leads to panic and confusion. By assisting local law enforcement with understanding the broader implications of the situation, the community outreach efforts were inclusive and provided consistent and accurate insights to all. This cooperative effort was the inspiration for establishing what we now know as the Los Angeles Security Advisory Council, a group of community organizations, local government, and law enforcement agencies coming together to collectively address community-wide safety and security concerns. Recent catastrophes have reaffirmed that local, state, or regional public partnerships are vital to filling the gaps in homeland security. That is why, really, our primary, the primary functions, and I have just a few moments left, our primary functions are a sophisticated network that allows us to instantaneously communicate with thousands of leaders throughout the nation with a clear, concise message, which truly does diffuse rumors. Rumor control is really a tremendous concern.
Yes.
It has to be real information, credible information, and that's why working with the federal and state governments is so essential. SCAN also has a security network that and a security website, www.scnus.org. This is considered one of the most, I'd say, comprehensive security websites in the nation that has aggregated every single type of best practice available to us that has been vetted and considered credible and is easily made available to clergy of all faith and those that are responsible for institutions of all faith. Again, thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to discuss some of the things that we're involved in, and we look forward to working with all of you in the future. Thank you.
Good point.
Great, thank you. It is very clear that all four panelists bring such a diverse experience to the table, but also there's a lot of key themes that weave in between all of what they said: community resiliency, the private-public partnership piece, as well as the individual preparedness piece. So it's great to have you all here and sharing your experiences. I don't know, do we have time to take questions? Okay, great. I think I can facilitate questions, but I think it'd be great for all of you to have a chance to ask the panelists any questions that you may have. So we'll open it up to the floor. Oh, great. Does it, go ahead.
I want to know how many of you four knew each other before today.
The three of us knew each other. This is the first time I've had a chance to meet Jennifer in person, but we've talked on the phone.
I know the organizations, I just haven't met individuals.
So yes, we have been working together.
We have been, yes, closely.
When you were opening, in your opening remarks, you used the word empower, which is a critical word in preparedness education. I use two other words. One is it has to be granular. We have to get it out to many, many people and really deliver the message, because we can't just blast advertisements. We have to help people take their hands a little bit, and therefore it has to be viral. We have to tap into networks like faith-based organizations in schools. Now, what I want to know is, we're working a lot in New York across the faith community, putting this on people's agenda. But that's a big, it's a heavy lift. Because when you go to a church, they have a lot to do, or a synagogue or a mosque. And I was wondering from the panel, what kind of, if you have any insight on how to really do the outreach, how to really get it on people's agenda, because they have the networks. How do we not only tap into your network, but the listservs and the websites of every church and synagogue and mosque around, having them send out the tips every week?
Great question.
All I can say is for Christian Emergency Network, we receive the content, the detailed content of our public service announcements actually from Pete Hull, from Homeland Security Institute, who is an expert in providing that content to us. We form that in a pre-produced form, and then we get that out to the Christian community. However, it is in a format that is easily replicated across other faiths as well. And so across businesses, across schools, I mean, the same content can be easily grabbed free of charge on our website. So that can be distributed throughout all sorts of media. It's there for you.
But the content has to be consistent and has to be credible.
Which is why we use Department of Homeland
Consistent and
Security
credible.
information.
It has to be consistent, but you know, it can be tailored, as long as you're giving the consistent. What the research shows is that people shop for information, and that's why you've done a great job at ready.gov at keeping those 3 points. Those 3 points have to be the key, but we can tailor them to really deliver to faith-based communities, as long as we're giving the same message. And that's what I'm asking for, is do people have ideas on how to push the technology, not just have it out there? Ready.gov is
That's what we're
terrific.
going to be doing with the Ready Church initiative, which also crosses over faith. That's one of the basic components, is taking that collaboration, taking the communication, bringing it down to the local level, and making sure that it gets disseminated. That's exactly what it's about.
For
Good
us,
question.
at Interfaith, we've been around for 60 years, and the one true blessing that I have with that is our organization has a longevity and credibility already established within the community. And so when we started this department through at my organization, the community already knew about us, and we already were plugged into all the faith communities through our service projects that we do. And our local government, under our county judge and our mayor, were very interested and allowed us to have seats at the Joint Information Center and things of that nature. So again, we're getting the one voice and the one message. So I really do. It has to do with. I can't speak at a national level. I mean, Houston is the 4th largest city in America. I mean, we have 5 million people, but it's getting to know all the players by first off. And this opportunity is another great example of meeting more. But on the local level, it's definitely getting to know everybody.
I would just, before we leave this topic, a couple of things too, I would say from my perspective is obviously if your community has a citizen core council, I think that, this is what they are already doing and they can help plug you into that network. But also I think your local Red Cross chapters and organizations like that and your Office of Emergency Managers, I think that they're an important key because they're looking to reach a wide range of people with very important information, and you can be a very good partner in relaying that information and working together. And are you already doing some of those things, I would presume?
I'm on the Citizens Core Council.
Great.
I'm a senior trainer at Red Cross. So we're doing all of the, we're partnering all across the board, but they need us as faith-based organizations.
That's right.
To deliver the message.
And hopefully they're helping to craft that message with you because, the Red Cross partners with us on a national level on messaging and things like that. So, okay, next question, sir.
Yeah, mine's, I guess, for the panel and for Jay and for Pete. At the grassroots level, all of you talked about resource management as being key and critical. You're looking for resources and how to organize those. Paul's doing the same thing. Gary, you're definitely doing that with bringing all the your organizations together. And Mary, I know that's one of your big pushes too, is that what do I have and how can I access it? That works at your organizational level, but how do you work that across platforms? And Jay, and how do you work with bringing that up to the federal level? Because I know at FEMA, in ESF6 or Human Services Branch, we have that same problem with government organizations. It's got to be 10 times as difficult for faith-based communities.
I think, if I may, just to jump in on that, that's where I mean, look, 5 years ago, my 13-year-old son was showing me how to use a computer. And he still comes in now and then to show me the right thing to do. So the reason I say that is I'm not a technological genius, but technology here is of the utmost, I think. Sharing resources instantaneously can be done technologically, where we know how many beds, how many trucks, what each organization can offer up, when they can offer it up. If you have a catastrophe go down, in an hour from now, there should literally be a tech, which there is. The technology's out there. Well, I know that I can't speak for DHS, but I know that DHS and I know that FEMA and other organizations have been exploring this very, very heavily. To be able to, I could tell you that at state levels, a lot of states are doing it now. But there is the methodology, there are ways to instantaneously share our resources with each other at a second and say, I know how many beds you have. I know how much water you have down there. So I just wanted to respond from the technology standpoint that that's a case where technology could really be a tremendous opportunity for us across the board.
Okay, I know
Jane,
we have
did
a...
you wanna, I didn't want to...
Yeah, I'll turn this back over to Jay. I think we're out of time, and I just want to thank our panelists. And again, if there's any other questions, I'm sure they'd be happy to engage with you after the discussion. But also, please always remember that if Ready can be assistance to you, we want to be helpful. Please don't hesitate to reach out to us at ready@dhs.gov. Thanks so much for your time today.
What a terrific panel. Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate it. Appreciate it. Thank you all. Thank you so much. Thank you. Well, I made a promise, and they made good on my promise. They were fantastic. Thank you very much. And to just show you how artful we are in designing these programs, Scott McCallum, our next speaker, has the answer to that question that you just posed. And so what we've done is we've asked the Secretary of Homeland Security to stay in the Situation Room just a few more minutes so we can rearrange our schedule. He's accommodated. He'll be here in about 10 or so. And Governor Scott McCallum is going to answer that question and use that as a segue for his remarks. I've already introduced you to my son's baseball coach. Now I'm going to introduce you to my former boss. I used to work in Wisconsin, and Scott McCallum was governor of Wisconsin. We shared time and territory there, so it's a personal privilege to invite you to the podium. And he's not only going to answer the question on the table, but he's going to talk to you about the use of technology in connecting the dots. As I said in my remarks, we all know we're a generous people. We give our time, talent, and treasure away in large proportion. But our generosity is not always smart, it's not always leveraged, and therefore it's not always high impacting. We need better, smarter solutions. And Aid Matrix is one of those solutions which FEMA has mobilized. And so Governor McCallum's going to tell you about that, in addition to answering the question that's on the table. He's a politician, so he can handle this too. Thank you.
Thank you, Jay, and thank you for the great job. I know it just keeps me on a tight leash here, which is a good thing. And I appreciate Jay was in the administration. We're talking ahead of time. I know he'd gone around. He said he was picking up lawn signs, one of my earlier campaigns. I didn't find out fully whether he's picking up in helping after the campaign or he's picking them out of the yards for people when I was still running for office. But I suspect you were helping. Okay, you were helping, Jay. I certainly appreciate the job Jay has done. It shows me the high caliber people that Governor McCallum could pick in his administration. But Jay, thank you for the job you are doing here and helping so many others. As pointing out, it's fun to be with a group like this because in many respects it's the same usual suspects that are in the group. Faye, who's a lot of the things, and Alex and Wendy, who we work with, and John Minnick of Homeland Security, who's tying in the private sector. Many of you working together at different levels, which is truly what it takes and what this program is about. The association of cooperation of people working together, Salvation Army, of what we do and things. The question earlier was on technology, and doesn't a system exist like this? The technology itself has existed for over 12 years. The difficulty, as you know, and everybody, I mean, I'm sure at some point you're sitting here thinking, okay, what's this program mean for me? How is my organization going to benefit by going to this program? How am I going to come out ahead? And in some respects, people ask me what it's like going to nonprofit from the political, and there are some very good things because we are commended when we're helping people, and everybody here, I've got to say, it's humbling for me to be with so many people that are helping so many others and dedicating their lives to helping others. So that is good, and we get accolades for that. The downside is often there's just as much politics in the nonprofit sector, and particularly when it comes to saying that we all come out ahead if we share and cooperate. And getting to that system is sometimes more difficult than one would expect. So you say the technology has existed, but as you know, the technology is so expensive. It's what the private sector is doing to compete worldwide costs millions of dollars. How do those of us that are working with those that can hardly, in many cases, can't find their next meal, afford to put in this state-of-the-art technology. The Aid Matrix Foundation itself is founded and has support of Microsoft, Dell, i2 Technologies, Accenture, a number of companies to be able to take state-of-the-art technology to help empower nonprofit organizations. Aid Matrix is in 6 continents, transacts $1.5 billion worth of business annually. Most of the charitable food in the United States goes through Aid Matrix technology. You haven't heard of it loudly before. We tend to try to think of ourselves almost as the Intel to help empower you to magnify your donations. I've got a few quick portals. We can go to the, is this the first one? Did you go to the first one? The National Donations Management Network, the question on technology, there now is a system in the United States that connects the private sector, government, and nonprofit organizations. The FEMA program, Homeland Security program, officially connects at federal expense with the number of donors in Aid Matrix. In the states, the national VOAD organizations. So those 50, and I believe, Camille, it's 53 now. I think 3 more were added. 3 added, still at 50. So, okay, 50 organizations are on the system. That being said, some states are adding more nonprofits, more NGOs into their state system, since this is state-driven. It controls the flow of unsolicited goods and services into a disaster area. Note the picture that was taken. First of all, you're thinking, how can I get what I need into here? We need to remember about 50% of product and volunteer services in a disaster or the secondary disaster, things that are coming in that aren't needed. So part of the system is things never move from a donor into the system, the warehousing or transportation, until the connection is made with the need. Next slide. There's a national effort, local action. If you can go through this, click again. There's a state portal. You can see corporations and individuals can go onto a state portal. The FEMA portal is the same thing. FEMA has a map of the U.S. You can click on FEMA, or you can take your cursor and click on to a specific state. Will connect you in to generally run through the governor's office of emergency. We've got, I think you're quasi-government in Florida, aren't you? In Texas as well, it's run through One Star until a disaster occurs. I'm talking mainly U.S. There are other examples in Honduras, as an example. The First Lady's office runs this as ongoing humanitarian work. A disaster occurs, COPECO, emergency government in Honduras, takes over and makes the decisions. Texas the same way with One Star and the governor's office taking over. And the nonprofit partners as the people in the field. At the bottom, we say technology, and the question was in technology. And I say this is supply chain technology. My wife has said never say supply chain. We say technology, people's eyes glaze over. It's an information system, but has the state nonprofit partners, members of VOAD, as well as the national partners at the federal level. Go to the next slide. I just wanted a quick shot of what states can have their own websites set up differently. This is on the governor's site out of Texas. There are 5 states. This was just announced in June as a national system. Already over half of the U.S. population is covered from states that have signed up. So it's gone, as I've said in the political arena, the only thing I have seen move this rapidly has been legislative pay increases. So it has moved the way government moves very rapidly. So, and you can see, not only was the technology expensive in the private sector, that you need to be able to apply for your organization because it can be applied internally for your organization. Think of it as hub and spoke. Your organization, as America's Second Harvest, then as Community Services, a number of organizations use the technology internally for their needs. They can connect with others in the spoke whenever they want to because it's a common data system. They can connect nationally. Or as we saw after the California wildfires, followed by the floods in Mexico, California could offer in a similar system to Mexico, all coordinated with each other. It also had to be simplified. When you're working with, we kind of kiddingly called, for those from Adventist, the light warehouse program we call Pastor Light, is because basically the first volunteers in are running it out of the churches and our pastors, and in many cases hadn't been involved with technology, need to be able to understand it. It's written in the Computer Weekly out of UK after Katrina, of how people were trained in the field within 30 minutes of how to use the system. California wildfires, California had just signed up for the system when wildfires hit. We actually switched systems in the middle of it. When I asked the CEO, I said, do we have to try? I mean, I can figure this out. Can anybody figure it out? And my staff says, well, it's kind of this way. Anybody under 30 doesn't need training. Anybody 60 to 30 needs some training. And over 60, it needs a little bit more training if they can get it. So that's, and I think that gets back to the first comment on young people understanding. Here's the way the page looks. You can donate financial support, product donation, volunteer registration. All are linked with each other. One stop as you go in, a common system, Kata data source for everyone. Next slide. It's a national network connecting local governments. The city of New York is now signing up, so this is pushing into local, where local communities can have on their own website the nonprofits they want in the community. They can connect to the state, states connect with each other, and countries are connecting with other countries in the common system. That, I would continue. I can, as a politician, you can go on for a long time, but when they hold up the sign that says 0, that means I'm out of time. So with that, thank you very much. I didn't know they were scoring me on my talk rather than telling me how much time was left. I'm told there's time for some questions if you have any. Again, we build this down. It's the national system, covers the 50 national VOAD organizations. Each state covers those organizations, but some states, I believe Florida is doing it. Texas, I know, is building out to a number of other nonprofits. California, during the fires, it turns out there wasn't much pull for the medical product. The National Association of Free Clinics are on an aid matrix system, entire medical, so we're able to link them in seamlessly to the whole system in California. Yes?
Yeah, and Katrina.
Yes.
When we had actually communications were cut off in the first days after the disaster. How would your system collect information in terms of the need in the community?
Okay, you can do it two ways. One is satellite-based because you can use your handheld to get the need in the field. And the other is you can go offline, get it to someplace to get it on the website. The other common question we get, by the way, is transportation. How do you handle the logistics? So Aid Matrix doesn't do the logistics. We help other organizations work to magnify the donations. That being said, UPS is sponsoring a component. So UPS is built in now with their transportation, and a group called ALAN, American Logistics Aid Network, we've built it for them. That includes over 1,000 logistics companies in the U.S. There are 3 questions on there. One is for the donor. The donor goes on and say, I will take care of transportation. You as a recipient can look and say, oh, okay, it's covered. 2 is I will pay for it, but recipient needs to figure it out. And 3 is recipient needs to figure out transportation. Logistics companies now will have that same information and will be able to match the needs. Yes?
How does a donor who makes a contribution into the Aid Matrix system ensure that their donation is directed to the source that they want it to go to?
Yeah, and a donor, the question is how can a donor assure that it goes to the source they want to? Donors have a choice of where they can say specifically, I want it to go to these groups only. They can say, I want it to go to anybody on the Aid Matrix network. There are 3 other questions on there that'll say, 1 is it can go to this disaster, to the specific group in this disaster. 2 is to any group in this disaster. And 3 is to any humanitarian cause at all. There are also some questions as you donate a product that you get into a little further of how it needs to be transported, the length of time that it is being offered, the types of questions you'd need. We're developing a global language for this. I just had the UN did a conference last week on how to handle these things, and I had a question from Finland, and they said, well, do you have a way of commonly measuring not only language difference? I said, and that is an important aspect. A liter of water to one person is a gallon to somebody else. Is it in a glass container? Is it in a plastic container? Or in Finland, is it in the solid form? Is it ice? There is that common language being developed with Global Hand, a couple of other groups, and the UN. But the important aspect from the U.S., is we have that common platform of sharing data now. There are no more questions. I see no more hands. I'm sorry. It's because of time. Again,
Governor,
thank you very much.
No, Governor, thank you so much. Not only for being flexible with us, which we certainly appreciate, but for the content that you offered, the richness that you gave our program, and even most importantly, the richness that you're giving to the partnership development all across the country. There's a big difference between a federal strategy and a national strategy. You're going to hear next about the federal strategy, and that's very important. But the national strategy is Feds plus us. And technology, smart technology, and strong relationships are required to make that happen. And you're adding great value to that equation. Thank you very much. Well, today we indeed are honored to have as our keynote the man who leads our nation's efforts to protect the homeland. As Secretary of Homeland Security, Michael Chertoff oversees 208,000 men and women in a department that is charged with securing our country's borders, ports, transportation systems, and critical infrastructure while ensuring an effective, unified response to major incidents and natural disasters. Michael Chertoff came to this position well prepared. Prior to being sworn in as Secretary in February of 2005, he served as a federal judge on the U.S. Court of Appeals, and before that as Assistant Attorney General at the Criminal Division of the Justice Department, where he helped trace the 9/11 attacks to the Al-Qaeda network and increased information sharing with FBI and state and local officials. It's noteworthy that as the lead for the President's strategy to make sure that another terrorist attack doesn't occur on our nation's soil, we should note that there has not been one. That is not something you read about in the newspapers every day, but it is something we should be grateful for and thankful to this Secretary's leadership, to be sure. While that experience that he had on the court and in the department, of course, is what has equipped him to lead the department, what he knows underneath the department strategy is that it does take the leaders in this room as invaluable allies in the cause, and that's why we're delighted to have him as our keynote. You help him fulfill his mission, and we're delighted now to hear about what that means and perhaps what the future holds for our partnership together to prevent, protect, and recover. Please join me in welcoming the Secretary of Homeland Security, Michael Chertoff. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you for coming out here, and Jay, thank you for the introduction, which was longer than my remarks will be. No, that's a joke. Every kind word was welcome and appreciated. I do appreciate your attending this conference because we are trying very hard to make sure that we incorporate faith-based and community organizations into the whole spectrum of our preparedness, response, and recovery efforts. You've already contributed a lot in dealing with various disasters, whether it's Katrina or wildfires, tornadoes, other and sundry natural catastrophes, and we want to continue to engage you in this process. The President's vision for the Faith-Based and Community Initiative is built on the conviction that we'll be more effective at addressing the challenges we face when government works in close partnership with nonprofit organizations that have a lot of experience and dedication working on the front lines. And we're trying to build on the President's vision to further integrate the planning and execution of our life-saving mission with the activities not only of our counterparts in government, but our counterparts in the NGO community, namely the faith-based and community organizations. So that's really what I want to talk to you about briefly today. And I can't imagine a more opportune time because, first of all, we're in the middle of a very active tornado season. So we don't need to be reminded of the fact that at a moment's notice, nature can visit some very serious consequences and devastation upon our communities. Second, we are approaching the onset of hurricane season, which officially kicks off June 1. And although the last two hurricane seasons largely spared the United States, there's certainly no guarantee that that's going to be the case going forward. We want to be as prepared as possible. And finally, even if we lift our eyes from our own shores overseas, the catastrophic events in Myanmar and China really underscore the importance of having an all-hands-on-deck approach to dealing with disasters. There's almost nothing that more quickly overwhelms government institutions and more readily demands the participation of volunteers than a natural disaster on the scale of some of what we've seen on the other side of the globe. Of course, coming into this process, we're very mindful of the lessons learned from the experience of Hurricane Katrina. The White House report on Katrina specifically emphasized the importance of faith-based and community organizations in emergency preparedness and disaster response efforts. Often, these non-governmental organizations, the report said, quote, provide the quickest means of providing local relief, but perhaps most importantly, they provide a compassionate human face to relief efforts. Our own Homeland Security Institute, which is going to be appearing here today, also found that faith-based and community organizations undertake a surprisingly large, varied, and demanding set of initiatives with extraordinary effectiveness. And so we want to do everything we can to harness this energy and the broad network of faith-based and community groups into our planning and execution so that we can bring the maximum resources to bear most quickly and most effectively in communities that are afflicted with natural disasters. So let me give you some specifics about what we've done to build a better and more robust planning and execution capability. Well, first of all, we've retooled FEMA itself. We've added experienced personnel who will have the benefit of having worked with community organizations as they move forward to deal with the responsibilities of a disaster. We've revised the National Response Framework to more effectively utilize voluntary organizations as part of the official response effort. The NRF now includes a volunteer and donations annex, which is particularly focused on integrating volunteer organizations in our preparedness efforts. Within the Gulf region itself, of course, which is a principal area that we feel is in the target zone of hurricanes, we've partnered with numerous faith-based and community organizations assisting in recovery and rebuilding efforts, from the Catholic Charities and the Southern Baptist Convention to the Urban League and the United Way. And also we've partnered with a lot of individual places and houses of worship. These groups can be credited, in large part, with the sustainable non-governmental efforts that are furthering recovery and rebuilding. Currently leading this rebuilding and reconstruction effort on behalf of the federal government is our Federal Coordinator for Gulf Coast Rebuilding, Major General Douglas Odell, former Marine General, who serves as the point of contact for our important work with faith-based and community organizations in the Gulf region. Now, as the President requested and mandated consistent with his vision, in 2006, here at DHS, we established our DHS Center for Faith-Based and Community Initiatives. Now under the leadership of John King Cook, this office has worked to expand partnerships with many of the NGOs that are here, represented here in this room today. John's team has been working under the FEMA administrator to identify gaps, work through obstacles, and increase participation and partnership between the faith-based community organizations and the Department of Homeland Security. I'll give you a few examples of what they've done. First of all, our Faith-Based and Community Initiatives Office has hosted numerous half-day emergency preparedness workshops to bring together faith-based and community organizations together with state and local emergency management officials in specific urban areas. These include Tampa, Charleston, Miami, Houston, and Denver. Nearly 1,000 people have participated so far, and this workshop is going to be featured in 6 additional cities later this year. Our office has participated in nearly 30 outreach meetings around the country to provide emergency preparedness information and ensure that faith-based and community organizations are included in our decision-making and planning processes. The office has collaborated with the National Voluntary Organizations Active in Disaster, VOAD, as well as with state groups in D.C., Northern Virginia, and Maryland to clarify some of the policy issues relating to involvement of faith-based and community organizations in disasters in the national capital area. The office has informed hundreds of nonprofit stakeholders about upcoming opportunities for grant funding, as well as the release of the revised National Response Framework. And as they continue to work with Citizen Corps, the nation's premier community preparedness and resiliency program, and our READY campaign, John's office of faith-based and community organizations is going to continue to encourage organizations at the grassroots level to get more involved in preparedness at the local and state level. At every stage in which you touch ordinary individuals, whether it's in the context of religious activities, educational activities, or other kinds of community activities, you have an opportunity to instill in people the recognition that preparedness has to begin at the individual and family level. And the more prepared people are, the better they plan, the more they take preparatory steps, the less the burden will be placed upon those who have to respond to assist people who can't help themselves. So in that sense, it is a civic and moral responsibility for people to engage in a reasonable level of preparedness so that they lift the burden for those who have to help people who are in dire straits who cannot help themselves. Let me take the opportunity to talk about some of the specific value that organizations in the faith-based and community arena have added in some of our recent disasters. During the California wildfires of last fall, our faith-based and community organizations in California partnered with FEMA's community relations teams to help provide information to members of the clergy and chaplains on individual assistance programs so they could reach out to their parishioners and those they were assisting and give people information about what they could do in order to get the assistance to which they're entitled. We also worked through FEMA's voluntary agency liaison to identify faith-based and community organizations that were supporting the shelter and feeding effort which was taking place in Southern California. And FEMA worked to support these organizations to help organize long-term recovery committees in which these organizations and other community groups could participate in helping to map long-term assistance to individuals and families that were affected by the fires. Just this past week, our voluntary agency liaisons and community relations teams have been on the ground in Oklahoma and Missouri to assist with response and recovery efforts, recognizing that faith-based and community organizations will be an important part of outreach in Oklahoma and Missouri as in other communities while the recovery from the devastating tornadoes continues forward. Of course, I don't want to make it seem as if all that we do to engage with faith-based and community organizations is disaster recovery, although that may be the area in which your activities are the most salient and where you touch the most people. But we are trying to make sure that across the whole spectrum of what we do at DHS, that we are integrating and interacting with faith-based and other non-governmental organizations to make sure we're being sensitive to the concerns of our various communities and to make sure we are disseminating information about how people can help themselves and what we are going to request people to do in the broadest and most accessible way possible. Let me give you a few examples. Our Office for Civil Rights and Civil Liberties has reached out and engaged with many faith-based and community organizations on security issues unrelated to natural disasters. And that's particularly true with our outreach in the Arab, Muslim, Sikh, and South Asian communities in the post-9/11 world. We have, as you know, of course, an incident response team that we get networked on the telephone whenever there's a terrorist incident that might concern some of the communities in this country, to make sure that everybody has full situational awareness and that we're not allowing people to somehow exploit these incidents for reasons that would be inappropriate. Our U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, which of course has the responsibility for welcoming new citizens into the country, also maintains a vigorous community relations program that works with our faith-based and community organizations. Transportation Security Administration has worked with community leaders in the Sikh community to refine our security screening procedures for headwear to make sure that we are able to carry out our mission of assuring the security of our aircraft and our transportation systems, but to do it in a way that is sensitive to various cultural factors that might affect the way people present themselves at the airport. And of course, protective security advisors from our Office of Infrastructure Protection have been out visiting major Jewish facilities across the United States to convey information about terrorist threats, particularly threats that appear to be increased as we've seen some terrorist activity against Jewish organizations overseas. The protective security advisors continue to work with members of faith-based and community organizations, including the Anti-Defamation League, the Jewish Community Centers, and the Secure Community Network, as part of their regular mission to assist state and local officials in protecting critical infrastructure and community facilities against possible terrorist attack. And as part of this effort, we've conducted vulnerability assessments and reports on religious facilities and coordinated buffer zone plans and site assistance visits so that community groups and religious organizations can help themselves improve their security, particularly during the religious holidays when, as we've sadly seen, some people might be tempted to vent their hatred or their ideological axes to grind against people who are going to worship under their faith. So we've taken a broad view of what we can be doing and what we ought to be doing with respect to our faith-based and community partnerships all across the domain of the Department of Homeland Security. We want to continue to work with you to improve this relationship. Among the challenges we have ahead of us are we have to improve credentialing to make it possible for those who are volunteering to be properly credentialed so they can arrive at a place where there is a disaster or some kind of an event and quickly get to work assisting those who need that help. We need to further integrate logistics management. And as you know, Aid Matrix, which I think Governor McCallum talked about, is a great step forward. What we really want to do is leverage the capability of IT and networking so that we don't become a clog in the distribution of assistance, but rather an enabler. It's kind of the idea of using eBay as a way of getting those who want to give assistance and those who need assistance together. And if we can get out of the way of that process and simply create a framework within which you can provide that assistance using the tools of the internet, I think that's a very positive thing. And so we want to encourage the development and the enhancement of this kind of Aid Matrix tool. We want to continue to work with NGOs to lay out best practices so that you can learn some of the lessons we've learned, because each time we go into a disaster, we're presented with new challenges and we have some very important lessons that we learn about how we can better respond. The bottom line is, and this is vividly illustrated by what's going on in China right now as we speak, in a disaster, particularly one of catastrophic proportions, we cannot afford to leave any resources or tools on the table. What we've got to do is get everything we have from the level of the federal government down to the level of individual neighborhoods, everything into the fray to get as much assistance as effectively as possible to the people who are in need. And obviously a critical part of that element is the very strong network of faith-based and community organizations around this country that have every day carried out an aid and assistance mission, and therefore have the people who are dedicated, have the knowledge of the community, and have an understanding of how to deliver this kind of assistance with a kind face. That's very much what we need to do as we respond to both the kinds of events that we can foresee and the kinds of events that perhaps we cannot foresee. Of course, there's a lot more work to be done, and we're not going to get everything perfect overnight. But by continuing to work together in a partnership mode, by continuing to use our faith-based and community organization office as a kind of a one-stop shop with FEMA, by continuing to include the role of these organizations, volunteer organizations, in our national response planning framework, I think we can maximize the opportunity that you will have to contribute and maximize the benefit that we get from having you as partners in what is truly a work of the Spirit, which is giving assistance to those who need it when they are in dire straits. Thank you very much for the work you're undertaking. Thank you very much for being here. I hope we have very few disasters to work together on over the next year, but my experience and my common sense tell me that we're likely to have more than a few, as we've had already this year. So we look forward to standing shoulder to shoulder with you and trying to help people who need that help more than anybody else. So thank you very much for your work.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. As the Secretary's remarks illuminated, the faith-based and community initiative at DHS is not an adjunct. It's not a separate program. Indeed, it's a central governing strategy. That's why he was able to give example of success and also examples of policies and program application that were very varied. And that occurred in part because the department's committed to research. The Homeland Security Institute has produced a report that I think each of you should have in your materials that defined in the Secretary's words the scope and the scale of these invaluable organizations. And to describe that to us, the leader of the research effort is Pete Hull. Pete?
Good afternoon. What a blessing to be here today. I was remarking to John sitting next to me, the amount of goodwill in this room, you'd think that we could fix just about anything with all the wonderful hearts that are here. Greg, next slide. Department of Homeland Security asked us to look at 5 questions. The 5 questions were, did faith-based organizations and secular non-governmental organizations have a significant impact in the wake of Katrina and Rita? What were the services they performed? What were the limitations and challenges they faced? What were the best practices they developed? And if they did have a significant beneficial impact, why so? Greg? We contacted 1,082 organizations. We had a team of 6 researchers that worked this project full-time for 6 months, and then another couple folks for 6 months after that. 252 interviews, 46 in-person, in-depth interviews. For example, we spent a day with Gene Ground and his team in the lower 9th Ward, time with Operation Blessing and others who are here today, with Billy Graham Evangelistic. And we did 46 of these in-person, in-depth interviews. We visited the area, spent some time there, not as much time as many of you. Then we did a conference, and the conference's purpose was to say, hey, did we get it right? Did we figure out what happened there? And then we followed that up with a survey. Slide. So what do we find? We found what you in this room already know. You did have a significant impact, and it was by both national, local, and international organizations. What's interesting is some organizations were the focal point in some communities. Sue Taylor and her group were the focal point in one community while there was an absence of government there. Slide. So what were the services that were performed? Shelter, food, medical, hygiene, mental health and spiritual, physical reconstruction, logistics, transportation, children, and case management. Slide. Slide. Thank you. Shelter, 79% of the organizations we interviewed provided shelter in some form. That's either sheltering the evacuees or sheltering relief workers, or doing both. Discussion points, things that we noted. If you're in the shelter business, you're also in the transportation business, and that was unanticipated by some of those who provided shelters. The other things that we noted that was a bit of a surprise was the importance of shelters as beachheads for relief workers and volunteers to come to the area and to be able to reach into the community and provide help. Greg? Slide. Food services, 85% of the organizations we interviewed provided food services. The types of categories are shown there. Discussion points. One of the interesting things was if you have an existing commercial kitchen or a faith-based organization's kitchen or something that's already in service, you are at such an advantage over an organization that's trying to do it on the fly. Slide. Medical services. 62% of the organizations provided some sort of medical service. When you see the large number there for advanced medical care, what that's referring to, for the most part, are organizations who hosted folks like Operation Blessing and others who came into the area and provided services. Discussion points are shown. Slide. And I apologize, I'm really blasting through this. This is a 5-hour program compressed to 1 hour down to 6 minutes. So, personal hygiene services, 88% of the organizations did something with personal hygiene. They put together kits, they distributed kits, they offered showers, or they offered laundry services. A couple of the interesting things that we noted there were the needs of evacuees and relief workers differ dramatically. Evacuees, essentially, if you could get them in, get them a shower for that first time, get the material off of them, you're in good shape. But your relief workers and volunteers, and most of you know this, are going back every day into that hostile environment and have to be decontaminated at the end of the day, each day. Slide. Mental health and spiritual services. I think the key point I want to make here is that your evacuees and your relief workers and the folks at your facility are eventually all traumatized to some degree. Slide. Physical reconstruction, 54% of the organizations provided physical reconstruction services. They're shown. Again, an important thing there is beachheads. You have to have some place for people to operate out of in order to reach into the community and provide help. 80% of the organizations provided some form of logistics service. The numbers are shown there. The point about credentialing that the secretary made is a huge point. We heard that over and over in our interviews. I couldn't get into the area, or I could one day, but I couldn't the next day, those sorts of things. And right things at the right time. I was pleased to see Governor McCallum's comment at the bottom of the slide. I think where Aid Matrix says the right thing, the right time, the right people, or something like that. That's wonderful. Palletized supplies was an interesting point. We heard over and over about the difficulty of unloading trucks that have palletized supplies on them and now having to unload those trucks by hand. Slide. Transportation. This is a fascinating one. There are some nuggets in here that we did not anticipate. One of them is the need to further evacuate evacuees because of the approach of Hurricane Rita. So you're a shelter, you've taken these folks in and you're doing sheltering things, you're a little church or a little mosque or a little temple, whatever. Now all of a sudden you're told there's another hurricane coming, you have to move your evacuees. Well, your shelter residents. A lot of facilities were not prepared to do that. Slide. Children's services, 50% did something related to children's services. The thing we heard over and over again there was the importance of getting children into a school environment. Slide. Case management, the numbers are shown there. Next slide. Findings and limitations and challenges. Here's a summary of them. Long-term routine needs, the need to move people after they've become your shelter resident and over a period of weeks or months became an issue. Best practices. I want to point out 2 best practices there. The 2 most important ones that we heard were specialization and partnering. As organizations, you've specialized in different areas, and if you can partner to make that specialization complementary to each other, that's powerful. Slide. And why it's so effective. This is an audience where I probably don't need to tell you why you're so effective. You know that. But those were the findings that we cited. I apologize, a very fast presentation of this. I think we have 10 seconds for a question, or do we? No, we don't. I have a 0. All righty, thank you so much.
Pete, you always want to leave them wanting more. That's what I've heard. That's the case. We would like to listen to you longer. Fortunately, though, you do have the report. For those of you that haven't read it, I do commend it to you. Documenting is of value. Presenting the detail that enables us to determine what to do with these findings is just invaluable. So thank you very much for your efforts. The last panel, we were trying to think how to bring this all together. You know, when we talk about federal, state, and local, and we talk about government and voluntary action, public and private. And so we thought, well, why don't we get a moderator who's just done each of those roles? And so if I could invite our next panel to come forward and take the seats that are before you. If you have a name card, could you bring that as well? Merle Jones is a deputy director at the FEMA agency, which houses the Center of Faith-Based and Community Initiatives, and you have played a leadership role in those varying levels of government as well as in a public and private capacity. So we're eager to have you here, and I appreciate your participation.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. And I am certainly honored to follow some of our speakers today, and my boss, the secretary. It was good to hear that he's well-versed in what we do in individual assistance programs at FEMA. One of the things that we've sort of heard throughout all the presentations today that we're actively involved in is this coordination. And the coordination, of course, starts in all aspects of emergency management and preparedness, which is what you heard earlier from the panel. And it's very difficult to sort of, you have blurred lines between the different phases, between preparedness, mitigation, response, and recovery. And you know, you heard that in the earlier presentations, and I'm sure you're going to hear that from our distinguished panel up here. One of the things that we enjoy very much at FEMA during that preparedness phase is working with the National Voluntary Organizations Active in Disaster, which includes the ecumenical and non-ecumenical organizations that provide disaster relief. And I think the last count was approaching 50 national agencies and climbing. Each year they add additional ones. They just had a very successful coordination conference, bringing in the state voluntary organizations active in disaster, as well as some of the local coalitions that have started at the county, sometimes even at the city level, such as New York City. So that partnership is critical to disaster relief. FEMA, the federal government, the states, we can't do it alone, and you've heard that consistently throughout the presentations, and certainly the study that was just presented on you know, is a perfect example of the sheer impact the voluntary organizations have at the local and state levels. I also wanted to address, I think, a question that had come up earlier, and we're fortunate enough too to have Eric Smith here with us, who is our Director of Logistics at FEMA. Individual assistance programs, our disaster operations directorate, as well as logistics, we're working very closely with the voluntary organizations on the tracking of mass care supplies and commodities, and figuring out the technologies and the ways for us to better track and locate and supply the areas that need that sort of assistance. And Eric's been heavily involved in bringing that technology to FEMA for that. So Eric, we appreciate everything on the individual assistance side that you've done in that respect. So without further ado, I'd like to go ahead and move to our panel here. Our first speaker is going to be Wendy Spencer, who is the CEO for Volunteer Florida and the Governor's Commission on Volunteerism and Community Services. So, Wendy, please.
Thank you, Burl. Appreciate it. Thank you. Just a quick editorial comment. I think it's just wonderful that DHS and the Office of Faith and Community-Based Services out of the White House is pulling together these roundtables, but to have the Secretary of Department of Homeland Security visit and come to thank us for the work we're doing, who represents the greatest nation in the land, is really, really exciting. And the fact that Volunteers and Donations has been added to the annex in the National Response Framework just deserves a round of applause. It's great. It's really great. It's exciting. We've come a long way. And it's not by accident. It's because of the work that everyone has done individually and collectively. And I think that the future is bright in this arena. And thank you, Jay, for your leadership, and John, Kim Cook, and Greg for all of your teams, work, and Burl for including us and continuing these great roundtables. I worked with a state commission, a state service commission that was established about 14 years ago for AmeriCorps, basically. But when the commissions were established, the White House office and Congress said, take these commissions and go forth and do great work in your states for whatever issues are important to support service and volunteerism. So each state has a commission, and they look a little bit different, but mostly similar. But in our state, in Florida, along with many of the state commissions, disasters was very important, and we needed help. After Hurricane Andrew, we needed a lot of help that happened in 1992, as you recall. And because we had a disaster within a disaster, was the volunteer and donations response was not very well coordinated. So we took the commission and used it as a platform to be the coordinator for volunteers and donations in the state of Florida. And several commissions have followed suit in that in recent years, especially. How many of you know the name or work with your state commission that's in your headquartered office? Because many of you are not based in DC. They work with you. Few of you know your state commission. Thanks for your honesty. Most do not, but we'll name it in a minute. But that's not a surprise to me that most of you do not know your state service commission. I encourage you to get to know them. And many are starting to get in the arena of taking a lead in disaster work because each one of them are linked to their governor's office. By federal code, and in many cases state statute, they have to be linked to the governor's office in order to receive AmeriCorps funding. So it's a great platform and a start for a vehicle for you to go to work with and communicate on disaster work. Now, why is that important to you, and how is that relevant for those of you who represent relief organizations? I want to encourage you to make a case of why you're important in the states you work in or nationally to your governor or to your emergency manager or through your state service commission. If you haven't had any luck with your governor or your emergency manager just getting access, then try going to one of my colleagues, your state service commission, because there is great interest in wanting to take a lead role or at least help others in your states. And now's a really good time for that. And please don't underestimate the influence that you have in your states and in the work that you're doing. And the best way to do that is through documentation. I think, Jay, you've mentioned it. Several people have mentioned how important documentation is. And not only in post-disaster, of documenting what you've done, the value you had, the people, the resources, the services, but document and tell us what you're doing now, what resources you have ready to go, what the number of volunteers, the services you provide, the number of materials you've distributed out in preparation purposes. And you're going to hear a lot more about preparation through FEMA and DHS in the weeks and days to come with some initiatives that they're preparing right now to introduce soon and have been preparing. Of course, Erin, your work with ready.gov is just a great example of that. And I know you want to also amplify the preparedness work. But that's an area that sometimes we overlook. All of us are involved in response and long-term, most of us in long-term recovery, but the work you're doing on the front end helps the back end. So I encourage you to really not keep that a secret, but let everyone know what that is. In Florida, Jay, you mentioned that Katrina was the largest recorded response in history, recorded history, that it's recorded response. We still don't know what 911 was because of the inability to record all of it. But in Florida, what became that prior to Katrina, with the 04 and 05 storms, and we took the opportunity to document it with 150 organizations that we were working with, hundreds more we were working with. But one of the great things that we've been able to work in Florida is to categorize or catalog all of the agency's assets and putting together in a catalog statewide the work that many of you are doing, that I work with and our staff and Alex works with in the state. We know who you are and what your expertise is, whether it's crisis counseling, whether it's emergency child care, whether it's managing unaffiliated volunteers, removing debris, mucking out homes. We know who you are and we know what your expertise is, but we really appreciate when you're flexible. And Gary Flake is sitting here in the fourth row, and I'll tell you a quick story while I've got 1 minute left according to my time. About how flexible LDS was. is LDS came into our state after Hurricane Charlie, the first of 4 that year, and said, we've got 5,000 volunteers, just give us a plot of land, we're going to set up camp, and we're going to start helping people. And we said as the state entity, says, that's great, but let me tell you how you can help best. We need you to go and help the police and the fire and the emergency management officials and their families. If you'll start out with them first, that releases them and the burden of because they've been impacted terribly. That releases them into be able to help the community in Punta Gorda and that region quickly. They said absolutely, and went out and tackled that, and now you are an expert in offering that support to emergency management officials. That flexibility and that ability to do that is so important to a state entity. And in closing, I want to encourage you to reach out to your state entities. And again, if you hadn't had luck with access to your governor or access to your emergency management, try your state commission and tell them Wendy said go see them, because they'll call me and we'll work through trying to help, because we're trying to help you get access to the state. But the key is knowing who you are and what you're doing. Because if we don't know you and we don't know what your assets are, we can't call on you to help. We don't have that ability. VOAD is a great resource to be able to help do that link and provide that link. And that's a great asset. You know, there are strong VOADs in many, many states that can also be that link as well to the state entity. So there's many examples I could share with you, but I think the strong message is be vocal about what you have to offer. Don't be shy about it, and publicize it. Thank you very much for this time.
Okay, well, thanks, Wendy. And again, we had heard earlier, I had mentioned probably in my opening remarks about the volunteer agency coordination. And FEMA does have volunteer agency liaisons assigned to the field, and I'm going to pass on the comments we heard earlier to them, but that's an instrument working with the state, local, and tribal governments to ensure that coordination on the federal side, that we can bring our program information down. But the success of the recovery operation starts, long before the event takes place, and that's a very key point that we've heard throughout the day. Our next speaker is Penny Dendy, who's the Executive Director of Volunteer Mobile Incorporated in Alabama. So take it away.
Good afternoon. I am really glad to be here. And one of the things I'm really glad about being here for is to be able to say thank you to you all. I run the Volunteer Center in Mobile, Alabama. We're in charge of coordination of unaffiliated spontaneous volunteers in disasters and long-term recovery in our county. And in 2004, we were hit by Hurricane Ivan, and in 2005, we were hit by Hurricane Katrina. And many of you have been to our community, or your organizations have been to our community and given us a great deal of help. And I am happy to say that we are pretty close to being recovered. One of the things that's a disadvantage when you are the peripheral community in a storm is you don't get a lot of attention. How many of you knew that Ivan hit Alabama? A few of you. How many of you knew that Katrina hit Alabama? A few of you. But, we didn't get the publicity that New Orleans got. We didn't get the publicity that Mississippi got, but we got your help. And that's what's really important. I want to talk a little bit about what we do and coordination of spontaneous volunteers, and also how we can work with you as not being spontaneous volunteers, but being affiliated volunteers, and how we can work with you in our community and how volunteer centers around the country can do the same. Back in about 2 weeks after Katrina hit, we had a mayoral election in our community. And our new mayor, who I will have to tell you all because I'm very proud of this, is our first African-American mayor. He ran in a field of 9 candidates, and he won without a runoff with 66% of the vote. Wow. It is a very, very proud day for our community, and he is a wonderful mayor. One of the things that he did right away, though, was to set up task forces to look at transition and look at what he ought to be working on in the community. One of the task forces that he set up was Homeland Security. And interestingly, on the Homeland Security Task Force, he had the FBI, who have a presence in our community because we're a port city. He had the port folks. He had the mayor, had the police department and the fire department, and he had the volunteer center on that Homeland Security Task Force. And, in the health department. And I kept thinking, well, this is really interesting, and I'm really happy to be part of this. But this is a new day for us to be seen as part of Homeland Security. Well, the whole purpose of that was to look at how we were managing the people that came into our community after Katrina and making sure that the people who were coming were providing the help that we needed and not preying on the victims. What do? How do we protect them? And the more we talked, the more he realized how incredibly valuable the volunteer coordination part is to the community. We have established a program of volunteer reception centers, the same training that Jenna from Houston was talking about through the Points of Light Foundation, which we have been an affiliate of since it was the National Volunteer Center before Points of Light even existed. But we used that model, and we screen the volunteers who come in. They are directed to our center. We screen them. We we have them register with us. They have to sign a pledge saying they will not be compensated for the work they do. They will not ask to be compensated. They are given assignments. They are given safety training, and they are given credentials, and they are sent out to work with people who supervise them. We have done this, we did this for Katrina. I will tell you a little quick story. We did it for Ivan, but in Ivan we did a virtual volunteer reception center, and we had no power, and so we did it out of the 3 bedrooms at my house, and my poor husband had to live for 4 weeks until we moved into the disaster field office. We had to do it with him trying to get around us, and we staffed up there. But what we do there is we not only give them their assignments, but we track what they do, and we keep those hours. Why is this important? This is important because local communities are required to match 25% of FEMA dollars that come in. This can be used during the response phase as soft match for those dollars. And it's increasingly important for communities to have this asset because the cost of disasters is getting to be, it's always been awful, but it is unbelievably high now. And so it's a big plus for communities. We give them their assignments every day. They don't just come in once and then they're given and sent out. Now, one of the things that in our city that the mayor and the police department have requested, and the nonprofits, particularly like Salvation Army and Red Cross and those sorts of folks, have said, yes, we'll do that. They're sending all of their volunteers through us so that they can all get the credentials and we can track all of their hours. The health department supports us. They bring in teams who can, when you're doing disaster cleanup after a hurricane, you're dealing with all kinds of refuse. They're there to give tetanus shots to people that get hurt, to do first aid, that sort of thing. So if a volunteer is hurt, they can come into the center and get treatment immediately. This relieves the pressure from the emergency rooms at the hospitals, which are already overloaded. And so these volunteer reception centers are extremely important for managing unaffiliated volunteers and affiliated volunteers in disasters. We don't ever say that we're going to tell your volunteers what they are supposed to do. We're just going to give them the badge so they can get to where you need to go, and we're going to track their hours so that the community can take advantage of that, and there's one database that shows what all the volunteers are doing. Now, the other thing that happens is that when you put up an 800 number and a local telephone number and you say, this is where volunteers go to register. If you want to volunteer, call this volunteer reception center. About 70% of the calls you get are not from people who want to volunteer, but they are people who need help. They need it right down. It's the little lady who has a tree down and can't get out of her back door. It's the family who don't know where to go to get ice. And trust me, in South Alabama after a hurricane, ice is a very, very important commodity to have. So what we do there is through this system, we also track those needs. Well, I'll give you a good example. The Methodists who have teams that come in and cut down trees and remove debris, they love it because they come to us and they say, okay, give me work orders. And we'll give them lists of people who need this help in the same neighborhood, and they go out. They don't want to be answering the phone, they want to be cutting trees. You know, Salvation Army, Red Cross will say, okay, where do you see that we still need to deliver food that we haven't heard from, that we don't know about? We give them that information, and they love it because it means that they can deliver food and not be out searching for the people that have fallen through the cracks. It has been a very, very valuable system in our community. It's worked very well. We have also replicated it in Enterprise that was struck by tornadoes back in the spring. And most recently, I went and helped Hands on Atlanta set up a volunteer reception center after the tornadoes that hit downtown Atlanta. We also have an AmeriCorps team. We're very close to our state commission. That is an emergency response team, and they are currently on a 60-day deployment in Arkansas. They've been to Tennessee, they've been to Missouri, and one of the things that they do there is help set up volunteer reception centers that local communities can then run. We also are very involved in long-term recovery. And that is we are the agency written into our county's plan to coordinate that. We have been working with our county emergency operations, our county emergency management agency since the early 90s. And they have written us in as the organization that manages spontaneous volunteers and also the organization that coordinates long-term recovery. Well, what does that mean? That means that we convene. We bring people to the table. We bring those of you who want to be involved in long-term recovery to the table. We all work together so that we are not duplicating efforts, so we are not all going to see the same clients and missing others. With Ivan, we called the first meeting and we had nobody show up. We called the second meeting and we had 12 people show up. And consistently, until Katrina hit, we had 11 or 12 organizations that were working with us on long-term recovery from Ivan. Katrina hit, and we called the first meeting of the Long-Term Recovery Committee to come back together. We had 65 people, 65 different organizations show up. Everyone walking in saying, we're going to coordinate the long-term recovery for Katrina. The rest of y'all can go home. And we all just laughed and said, it's going to take everybody in this room and everybody else that we can attract to come in here and work on this. It was so critical that we do that because so many of those who came in who want to take over and want to do their job had no background, no training in how to do it. So we had problems where we had a big group that came in who said, okay, our goal is we want to go in and do temporary repairs and do repairs quickly so that these houses don't have 50% damage, 50% of the value and damage. Well, in our county, that meant that if you had 50% or more damage, you had to elevate your house because the problems were flooding in our community. And if it was more than 50%, then you were required to elevate your house. So they thought that their great gift was to go in and do enough repairs so that when the assessors came, there was less than 50%, and then these people wouldn't have to elevate. We had to point out that if they had that much damage, then they needed to elevate. This wasn't a punishment. This was to make them safe and secure. And so we had to work with them. And it took those 11 who'd been working on Ivan to convince the 63 who hadn't that they needed to understand what the process was all about and they needed to fit into the process that works. They rejected the fact that everything had to meet building codes. Well, the county waived the fees and the city waived the fees for inspections and for permits, but they certainly weren't going to waive the codes. And we didn't want our neighbors living in houses that didn't meet code. So it's very important that you have a very organized approach to this. It's also very important that it be a local organization that does it, because as FEMA is very quick to say, all disasters are local. And 3 years later, we are those organizations that were the 11 with Ivan are still there. The 63 who weren't are gone, and we are still doing recovery and have been. And so it's very important that we do that, and I'm out of time, or that's my score too. But I'll be glad to answer questions later.
Thank you, Penny. Penny hit on the long-term recovery committees, which it's critical, and as I said, recovery starts well before the disaster occurs, but long-term recovery planning and that coordination is critical, because once the federal and state dollars, insurance money, starts to be spent, it's critical for that long term. What happens after FEMA returns to the region, the state goes back to normal operations. So long-term recovery planning is critical for the donated dollar and services. Our next speaker is Don Gann, who's the Assistant Director of Disaster Relief for the Mississippi Baptist Convention Board.
Thank you for the opportunity to be with you today. As Penny mentioned, we have learned through the years that disasters are all local, and we learned that especially in Mississippi after Hurricane Katrina. After Hurricane Katrina, we were inundated with the response of so many of you, and are appreciative of all that you did to come and help our area in the recovery and in the relief and in the response phases of that disaster. But one of the things that we realized was that in working with our national organization, Southern Baptist Disaster Relief, that we needed to develop a plan to work in our local communities with the presence that we had in that community, and that was our churches. Many of our churches, we had, the coast of Mississippi is only about 90 miles long, and along that coast we have about 160 Baptist churches. And of those 160 Baptist churches, 131 were damaged in some way, many of which were destroyed. And so we determined that our best move would be to go in and help stabilize those churches so that those churches could meet together and somehow continue ministering to each other and to their communities, so that they would continue to be the foundation and the stronghold that they are in those areas. It was interesting to me that after we had begun our opportunity of trying to work with these churches, that one of the churches on a sign that was someone just hand painted, the sign said, "Building destroyed, but the church survives." And I think our community so well reflected that. Much of our assistance was delivered through those local congregations. The money that we received in aid, we distributed not so much to those churches, but through those churches, because they knew who was in need in those communities. For us, Mississippi Baptist Convention, to a local Mississippi Baptist, that's sort of like saying FEMA to someone. They know it's out there, but they're not sure exactly what it is. But they can point to their church and say, "This church helped me." And that's what we wanted to accomplish, and so that's what we worked. Much of our assistance was delivered in that way, and we also supported those local churches who were much more aware of the people who not only needed the help the most, but who were in danger of falling through the cracks. And so we worked very hard to try to work in that situation. Southern Baptists have been known nationally for a long time for our ability to feed people. Almost every state convention, every Baptist state convention, has the ability to feed high volumes of meals. Now, feeding is not all that we do, just like your organizations do many things. But through our agreements with the Red Cross and Salvation Army and America's Second Harvest and many other organizations, we were able to feed many people along our Gulf Coast. In fact, in the first months after Katrina, before Thanksgiving, Baptists fed over 3.5 million meals along our coast. This year, Southern Baptists have fed over 1 million meals in the areas that have been hit by tornadoes and flooding and wildfires and so forth. Food and water are basics. They are basic needs for people. And when people know that they have food and water, they can begin the process of recovery because they know their basic needs are met. In each of these local settings, any hungry person needs to be fed. And while we do much more than feeding, we encourage our other faith-based organizations and groups to find the thing that they do well and stick with it. One of the things that while we're known for those feeding and providing meals, Baptists have been able to bring volunteers to the table, and they have shown a willingness to respond, and especially in Mississippi. Since Hurricane Katrina, over 100,000 volunteers have worked through Southern Baptist channels along our coast. Now, if you go and do a demographic study of the Mississippi coast, you'll find that 100,000 volunteers is almost a third of that whole population of the coast. That means it's almost one volunteer for every 3 people. And so it's been a great thing to see those volunteers who have been excellent in their work. And we have found that trained volunteers are the best. Mm-hmm. And so I suggest a couple of things that have been helpful to us. One is that training is a big part of disaster preparation. And we have found that FEMA courses and other courses that Red Cross and many of your organizations offer are a huge help in training those volunteers who come. Our volunteer leadership utilizes online courses like FEMA 100 and 200 and 700, 800 as part of our regular training, and it complements what the training that we do that is specific to our organization, and it complements nicely. What we have found is that training helps volunteers express the compassion that they have that comes with their faith. And so we encourage training. Also, we have found that VOAD has been extremely helpful in working together with many organizations so that people find that that resources and other opportunities from each organization are utilized to their capacity. And also being at the table when plans are made is huge. I think it was interesting that both of these who have made their presentations have mentioned the fact that we must get to know those people in our areas and our communities who are making the disaster plans so that we can share with them in advance what we have that is available. With the help of our National Disaster Relief Director for Southern Baptist, Terry Henderson, who's here today, I believe that we're continuing to make great strides in helping people in disaster, and it's been an honor to work with him and to work with many of you in the past. Thank you.
Okay, to help Pete out here, how many folks have actually stopped off at a Salvation Army canteen kitchen, a Southern Baptist kitchen, or a Red Cross kitchen and had a meal on a disaster assignment? I found myself in my 25 years of responding in the field actually looking forward to that one aspect of meeting the volunteers and having terrific food while we're out. So, I mean, the credit goes out to those that provide that service. Our last panelist is John Hope Bryant, who is the founder and chairman of Operation Hope.
You know, there's 3 things that, after sitting and listening to all these wonderful, passionate remarks, there's 3 things that hit me, 3 thoughts. One is the Bible says, where there is no vision, the people perish. 2 is you cannot have a rainbow without a storm first. It's not just a nice thought, it's a scientific fact. You cannot have a rainbow without a storm first. And the 3rd one is, and I say this respectfully, y'all crazy. I mean, you've been taking on Herculean tasks with a pea shooter, you know, but you do it with dignity, and you do it with pride, and you do it with both feet and your heart and your hands. And I don't want to be in the middle of the road when this lady's trying to drive down and trying to get to a disaster response. So she's committed. But crazy sort of like Jesus Christ was thought to be crazy. Crazy sort of like Gandhi was thought to be crazy. Crazy sort of like Nelson Mandela and Cesar Chavez and Mother Teresa and Martin Luther King Jr. and my personal hero, my mentor, Andrew Young, was thought to be crazy. Crazy in the right way. Operation Hope was founded by me after the riots of 1992, the Rodney King riots. People thought I was crazy. I was 26 years of age, and I wanted to start America's first nonprofit social investment bank. And they said, nonprofit social investment bank, that's an oxymoron, and you're a moron. They said it would never work, and they dismissed me. And luckily, they paid me no mind. Our first budget was $61,000. We had 1 employee who's still with me today. We've now raised $400 million for the poor. We're the largest of what we do in the country. We're in 51 U.S. communities, every urban community in America, outside of Florida, but we're coming. And I know of your work. You do. Come, and we'll coordinate with you.
Good.
We're also in South Africa. We have 400 of the largest financial institutions in the country as our partners, some $7 trillion in assets between them, 2,000 nonprofit partners, about 100 government partners, from President Clinton to President Bush, because our work is not partisan. Neither is yours. And so that was the first rainbow after the storm. And then we had an office at One Liberty at the Bankers Trust building in New York on 9/10. And on 9/11, that building was destroyed. And I turn on the television set, and here are my workers running down the street with a poof of dust following them. And it hit me. After you have a physical disaster, you're going to have an economic disaster. But where's the economic Red Cross? I love the Red Cross, love the Red Cross. But where's the economic Red Cross? Does FEMA do that? No. I mean, who does that? So I got on the plane and I flew to New York, and I remember between September 13th and the end of December, I flew, I think it was 20 times to New York. And basically, New Yorkers said, "You're not from New York, we got it handled." And so I went to Washington, and I said, because we finally were able to provide some assistance, because after a disaster, you have a car loan but no car anymore, a home loan and no home anymore, a small business loan and no small business anymore. Let's make this very basic. If you're one of the janitors who worked in the towers in 9/11, everybody's focusing on, the news was focused on the high net worth individual. Here you have this wife of one of the janitors who unfortunately is now deceased, going into the bank, trying to, in the middle of all this pain, trying to get some money for her family, being told you're not on the account. Huh? What do you mean I'm not on the account? This is my husband. We can't give you any money. You're not on the account. You've got to we need a death certificate. We need this. We need that. I mean, she's traumatized. So we were able to help, but I said, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to have to convince a state and a city and then also try to do the work at the same time. So I went to the federal government. I came to Washington, and people said I was crazy, and we went to DHS and FEMA. And make a long story short, we found some people with vision there at FEMA and DHS, and we signed a first ever memorandum of agreement, a national MOU, around emergency economic disaster preparedness, response, and recovery. Actually, it was response and recovery. Then right after that, that was with then Governor Ridge, and then right after that, we signed an agreement with Citizen Corps. And while FEMA was trying to figure out what to do with us, because they knew it was a good idea but didn't quite know what to do with us, we started scheming with Citizen Corps. And I said, there's an emergency, there's a first aid kit. Everybody's got a first aid kit. But where's the emergency financial first aid kit? So we worked with FEMA to create the first ever EFAC, the Emergency Financial First Aid Kit, which is now government document 532, if my memory serves me right. It's free for every American. It's free for you. You can order as many as you need whenever you need them. Because when a disaster strikes, somebody mentioned that your net worth, your plan is floating down the river. Well, the SBA says, well, we're glad to give you some assistance. We need tax returns. We need financial statements. We need, all the stuff that is no longer there. So we said, well, you need a place to organize your financial affairs is down to where are your children when disaster strike? What's the school phone number? Where's a copy of your credit cards? Copy of your tax returns? Copy of your Social Security number? Maybe it's $100 in a Ziploc bag. Give that to your mother or somebody you actually like. Put it, but not at your house. Let them keep it. Put it in a safe deposit box so you can get started, get your life back in place more quickly. After that, we responded to Florida, the hurricanes in Florida and 20 other disasters, and then Katrina hit. Now, this is very interesting. My wife and I would always go on vacation to Maui in August. And I said, we got to stop going on vacation in Maui in August. Because every time I go on vacation, I get a call about some hurricane or something going on in Florida. And it happened every year. And we'd end up with a command center on the beachfront in our hotel room. And this one call, though, was just traumatic. It was the call for Katrina. Well, we saw it on television. And then I saw a lady who couldn't get a FEMA payment because she didn't have a bank account to wire it into. It broke my heart. I don't know if you know it, but 30 or 40 million Americans have no bank account in the richest country in the world. This country, more people than the citizens of Canada. So then the phone rang, and it was the White House, and they said, well, we need to operationalize that MOU. We need you on the ground with regard to Katrina. Now, there were no operating plans. There were no funds for us. So we decided to do it on our own. We mobilized in the Gulf. We went in with no support from others, our own support. We're still there, by the way. And I'm proud to say that we've served 100,000 survivors of Hurricane Katrina. 100,000. Let me now speak to some specific numbers. This is from Fred Smith, who's the director of Hope Coalition America, which is the division that handles this work. So we have Banking Our Future, which taught 280,000 children financial literacy nationwide. We have our Hope Centers, which are our inner city bank branches, sort of a bank branch, cross between a bank branch and a Kinko's for economic empowerment. One-stop shopping for changing your life. We convert check cashing customers into banking customers, renters into homeowners, small business dreamers into small business owners and entrepreneurs. So where there is no bank, we bank it. We're the first nonprofit to build a bank branch and sell it to a bank. The third division is Hope Coalition America. We run this like a business, by the way. It's a nonprofit, but we run it like a business. So Hope Coalition America has helped 100,000 survivors, businesses and individuals, conducted 375 community preparedness and recovery seminars, assisted 3,877 small businesses in the Gulf, assisted 19,919 homeowners in Mississippi in partnership with the state of Mississippi, and our National Hope Call Center call line received 55,050 incoming calls. In addition to this, recently, as a result of the work with Katrina, and I'll come back to that for just a second, the city of LA called us and said, the city council president said, look, you're an expert in natural disasters, economic disasters. We have a man-made economic disaster. It's called the subprime crisis. We need your help. So we have now helped, from these numbers, 23,900 survivors or victims, if you want to call it that, of the subprime crisis in LA alone. Now, coming back to Katrina for just a moment. We went into Gulfport, Mississippi, because you said it is all local. At the end of the day, it's local. So we went into Gulfport, Mississippi, and we did a town hall. We got Bush Clinton Katrina Fund gave us some money to staff this area, and we also got 1,500 bankers and executives to come and volunteer to help people to mitigate their financial obligations, to negotiate with their lenders. Well, problem was that nobody either wanted to or could get to the Gulf. Their heart was there, but they couldn't get their feet and their body there. So we got Microsoft to create virtual volunteering software. So if you're sitting at a bank in Florida or a bank in New York, you've got 4 hours available. You can go online to the secure server, pull up Mary Jones's case file, call Mary Jones on her cell phone, which is probably the only way you can reach her, cross-connect to her lender, negotiate on her behalf, give her dignity back, renegotiate her loan for her home or her small business or her credit card, document the file, close the file, go back to work. Now Mrs. Jones calls back to our 1-800 number because now she's got confidence. There's one more thing. But now the volunteer in New York is no longer available, but the 1-800 line in Poway picks up and assign somebody else, but there's a secure server with all the records there, so that person can pick up right where they left off. So we have 1,500 virtual volunteers around the country who can mobilize on any crisis at any time, and we mobilize them with respect to the Gulf Coast. Here's the most exciting piece, and then I'll stop. We were in Gulfport, Mississippi, and President Clinton and I were doing as well as FEMA, we were doing a seminar in Gulfport around the home ownership crisis and whatever there tied to Katrina. And we were doing earned income tax credits. Now, all of you here, I think this is a benefit for everybody here. EITC seminar. Basically, in English, if you work and you have 2 children and you make less than $40,000 a year, the federal government owes you $4,000 a year. Short English. Short. Now, if you haven't filed once, you haven't filed ever. It's retroactive 3 years. So that's $12,000. $12,000 is a lot of money. That's enough money to send your kid to college, to fix your credit problems, to move, to reposition yourself, to start a small business, to repair your house. So while you're just focusing on where's my FEMA check, there's this other check that you can get within 3 weeks into your bank account that's up to $12,000. 1 out of 4 Americans who qualify for EITC last year never filed for it. So it's not a handout, it's dignity. You work, it's yours. 1 out of 4. We sent $9 billion back to the federal government last year because we never asked for what was ours. So you ask how many of your people that you're helping out there make less than $40,000 a year? Can I get an amen? Most of them. So now there's a police officer, there's a white police officer standing on the periphery, mostly these black folks around here in the seminar, and there's a white police officer against the patrol car like this. So I walk over to him and I said, and by the way, 88% of the people who are in that town, Gulfport, qualified for EITC. We returned $7 million in EITC refunds and $11 million in tax refunds in 4 months, doing nothing but public service announcements with no cost to our bottom line. So I said, the police officer, I said, why are you standing here? He says, well, I'm doing protection. The former president's here and you guys are here. I said, no, why are you standing here? He said, I just told you I'm doing protection. I said, no. I said, how much do you make? I said, no, I don't mean to be offensive. What percentage of the police department in Gulfport make less than $40,000 a year? He said, well, most of us. I said, man, get in line. It's not a black seminar. It's not a poor people seminar. If you were impacted by Hurricane Katrina, you live in this community, this is a benefit for you. If you make less than $40,000 a year, I found out that particular gentleman qualified for $8,000. That was almost a third of his income for the year. So he was able to reset his life with dignity without having to ask for handouts, beg, or. So I don't want to see that little zero thing. So I'm gonna stop. My mother always said you never want to be the old guy in the club. So before you kick me out, I'm gonna leave. But all of this, I guess I'm gonna end where I started. I said, well, there is no vision, the people perish. I've been asking President Bush to make financial literacy a priority, because at the root of all of this is massive levels of financial illiteracy. People with the subprime crisis asking what was the payment, not what was the interest rate. And we know that people that you're serving oftentimes are not financially prepared. Well, on January 22nd, he signed an executive order creating the President's Council on Financial Literacy, which will, thank you. And he made Charles Schwab chairman, and he made me vice chairman, and we'll serve until 2010. So things are possible. It is possible to change the world, and being crazy is not such a bad thing. And I'm honored to be here with all of you today.
On the heels of John's discussion there, I did want to also mention at FEMA, we do some volunteer agency coordination with what is the Emergency Food and Shelter National Board, which is made up of many of your organizations: Salvation Army, United Way, American Red Cross, Catholic Charities, National Council of Churches, and United Jewish Communities. And those are the folks that get the funding out to the local level to address the non-disaster needs of communities. And they just passed their 25th anniversary of this program's inception. So just wanted to sort of share that with everybody. A very critical program. I would like to thank the panel, who I believe all of which had a long distance to travel to be here with us today. And thank you all for coming and bringing your experience and wisdom. And I'd like to also thank our hosts here today, Jay and John, for the invitations to be here. So I'll turn it back over to. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Great job. We are out of time, and the bucket's full. We've heard a lot. We've been inspired. We've been informed. Hopefully, we'll be better engaged at the other end of this event. We didn't want any of the disasters to happen, man-made or natural, these last 5 years. But how remarkable that government has changed as fundamentally as it has in that time. We've gotten smarter and more collaborative in response. That was on display today. And we got ways to go. The Secretary told us that, and he was right. But I'm heartened by this conversation today, because we have a sophisticated response. It's not a fully robust one yet, but it's a sophisticated one. And we have a new platform to operate on. So you represent that, and you get that done in your communities. So again, warm word of gratitude for each of you, not just panelists, but many of you traveled by airplane to get here from a long ways away. We're grateful for that and for your service at home. We're adjourned. Thank you.